All right, hey everybody. Hi. Welcome to our October rendition of the liminal reading series. My name is Nikki.
I'm Michelle.
It's Michelle. We are the founders and the directors. Every title you could apply, it's the two of us that we do it all. And we're so excited that you're here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to hear Annell, Georgia, and Jesse read. Yes, it's going to be a great night, and afterwards we hope that you hang out. They do have swing dance after at 8, so we're going to go either next door to Cajun's or across the street to Hi Ho for some after reading drinks. We'd love for you to join us if you're around, if you're able. So, all right, without further ado, we're going to get started with our intro for Annell.
Annell López.
Woo!
So I met Annell online when she started UNO's writing workshop during the pandemic, when the back to school yacht party was like a weird Zoom rendezvous. Yeah, but like we immediately connected nevertheless when I found out that she was one, also a high school teacher, and two, from Newark, where I just so happened to spend my first 2 years teaching. Newark, not Brick City side, but the Ironbound or the Portuguese district, which certainly is home to a lot of Portuguese-speaking citizens, but really I felt like most at home there, anywhere in the Northeast, honestly, because it's really a lot like New Orleans. Yeah, have you been in the Ironbound? It is. I'm just gonna drop Creole, but I'll just keep going. Right, it's really rich. It's rich in diversity. It's like very cosmopolitan. It's welcoming, but with like a kind of no-nonsense, straight talk, edge, and authenticity that feels like home. And don't get me started on the food. But the point is that she, Annell, immediately felt like family, or at least I recognized our connection immediately. Annell brings to her writing exactly these characteristics: an edgy authenticity that is recognizable even in its most provocative moments or seemingly unfamiliar scenes, because there is no telling where Annell is going to take us tonight. Her poetry, for example, has placed me in the throes of a young girl's struggle to survive Bogota. Her fiction has brought me into the throes of complex contemporary relationships, so maybe some throws are at hand. But at the very least, we're definitely going to be treated to some really real fiction.
Yeah. Or nonfiction. Or
poetry. What is going to happen?
She does everything.
What is going to happen tonight? It's going to be magic.
Annell López is a Dominican immigrant, a Tin House Scholarship finalist and Kenyon Review Peter Taylor Fellow. Her work has appeared in American Short Fiction, Michigan Quarterly Review, Hobart, and elsewhere. Annell is an assistant fiction editor for New Orleans Review. She is working on a novel. Please give the warmest, biggest, wholehearted welcome to Annell López.
Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you so much for such a generous introduction. I'll be reading an essay for you today. So, no fiction, no poetry. Thank you. This is my first time reading an essay, and I think that there's definitely an element of vulnerability that comes with writing nonfiction. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and do it. This is titled, Something Had to Give. My dad texted me a photograph of his shooting score. A paper target graph featuring the outline of a man pierced by bullet holes. The picture startles me, makes me aware of the way that my body sinks into my sofa. Why is my father going to target practice? The dad I've come to know in my adult years has disavowed guns. He prefers to play poker in my aunt's basement. He buys organic vegetables at the farmer's market, takes his granddaughter, my niece, to the park, ties her shoelaces, make sure she doesn't fall off the swings. I don't respond to his message, nor am I impressed by his score. Minutes later, he calls. When I answer, he tells me I don't sound like myself. There's a shift in the usual tone of my greeting, and before we have a chance to go any further into the conversation, he asserts matter-of-factly that he does not like guns. He reassures me that he does not intend to buy one, and I breathe a sigh of relief. Once, Dad had a gun. A 9mm handgun he kept hoisted on his belt, a fixture as permanent as his clothing. When I think of his past self, the man who raised me, it's nearly impossible to conjure his image without also seeing the gun. It completed him, as did the jangling of his keys and his thick mustache and his peppy gait, the sheer enthusiasm of his walk, as if there were springs under his feet ready to catapult him somewhere. But it is the gun, shiny and black, held firmly in his grip, that I see clearer than anything else. I pause to wonder if I should tell him that for most of my childhood in the Dominican Republic, I lived afraid of that gun, that the sight of it often spun me into a haze of uneasiness and discomfort and all-consuming fear. It is true that I don't like guns. This I say with confidence. But I don't dare say that I did not always like the man my father was when he owned one. For years, I've asked myself if it was the object or the person holding it. Was it my father or was it the gun? Or was it the symbiosis between the two of them, the warping of his mind that made him, back then, think of himself as impervious to danger, the delusion that emboldened him enough to play cop, chasing burglars out of neighbors' yards? When I ask him why he had that 9mm handgun, he takes a deep breath and recalls, briefly, his repressed upbringing in the Dominican Republic, in a sugarcane plantation where violence was as abundant as sugar, where people watch and place bets on their children, their dogs, their roosters, which kid could punch harder, whose dog could gnash its teeth and lock its jaw into a fatal bite, whose rooster had the sharpest spurs. He talks about the ways in which he was expected to be a strong, unemotional man. He goes as far as describing something akin to toxic masculinity, but doesn't go far enough to assert what I already know, that his father was shot to death, that he bought the gun shortly after, and that, intermingled with his complicated grief, brewed a sense of fear. My awareness of the gun and the damage it could do dawned on me when I entered the 6th grade, when my 11-year-old body began to resemble that of a woman's. I became acutely aware of those changes, the fullness of my breast, the expanding of my hips, and inevitably, the way that the world began to perceive me. Boys at school smiled at me, but men around town consumed me with their eyes. Their sick, uninhibited desires spilled without shame, and on my walks to and from school, they would tell me what they wanted to do to me, what they would do to me if they had the chance. Weeks into my new school year, a man began to follow me to school. A familiar face I recognized from my neighborhood's bodega. He would drive alongside the curb, decreasing his speed. He would gaze unapologetically and wave hello. The first few times I offered a smile, a gesture of nervous politeness because, after all, he was an adult and I had been raised to respect my elders. I used to cherish my walks to school. I loved going up and down my street toward the boardwalk, the sun peeking through the clouds, the waves crashing against rocks, briny seawater misting the air. However, this routine was short-lived. This stranger kept reappearing in the same old gray car. He continued to slow down, getting as close to the curb as possible. If I sped up, as I often did, he would laugh at me, he would drive away, and he would return the next day. Back then, I did not know that the Dominican Republic had, and still has, one of the highest rates of femicide in the Western Hemisphere. What I did know is that women and girls around my town went missing, only to be found dismembered weeks later. Having looked at the man's rabbit eyes and the curl of hunger on his lips, I knew with certainty that if the opportunity were to arise, he would rape me. He would maim me. He would make me one of those girls left bloodied on the banks of an estuary, their bodies beaten, bruised, burned by the waves of the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. But there were only so many ways to get to point A, from point A to point B, and only so many ways that I could make it to school. There were only so many times I could reroute my commute, and no matter which way I walked, the stranger kept coming back. I found myself living inside of an equation. Eventually, I would reach a finite number of combinations. I kept trying to outrun him, trying to outsmart him, knowing all along that the time would come where I would have to tell my parents that I had a stalker. I knew I could stop him. I could tell my dad, and he would grab his gun, and he would put a hole through the man's fucking head. But I couldn't do that to my father. My tender father, losing his life in a fit of anger, was unfathomable to me. So I kept it to myself. I screamed into the void and hoped and wished and prayed that the man would grow tired of me. Long before the stalker came into my life, sometime in elementary school, I witnessed a couple of boys, brothers, bully a young girl. I interfered. One of the boys grabbed his basketball and tossed it at my face. When I resisted, they cornered me against a wall. One of them restrained me while the other one bounced the basketball over my face over and over and over. It lasted long enough to leave marks on my cheeks. When I came home and described the incident to my parents, they asked me to describe the boys. They wanted their full names. They wanted their parents' names too. I did not report the incident to the school, neither did my parents. My parents instead showed up at the boys' house at 10 o'clock at night, days after the incident, when my humiliation had subsided. Their unexpected visit was unsettling for the boys and their parents. They had been ambushed at night by two people who had masked her looking innocuous, who had asked shamelessly if it was a bad time. My parents would not leave until I got the apology I deserved, until it was clear to the boys and their parents that we were not to be fucked with. In the years following the incident with the basketball, I learned from my dad that if you punch someone in the neck, you cut off their air supply. That if you put someone in a choke, or if someone puts you in a chokehold, you don't resist, you go limp, and you drop, forcing them to contend with the dead weight of your body. That if you have to throw yourself into traffic, or down a flight of stairs, or off a cliff, you hold on to your attacker and you go on your own terms, and you take him with you. I learned that behind my parents' smiles lurked a disposition for violence, a willingness to be as ugly as necessary, and a sense of righteousness and equanimity that scares me to this day. It was difficult to articulate back then the layers of fear that I felt. Yes, the stalker scared me. The thought of what he could do to me terrified me. But the man stalking me like prey for so long left me to realize that I had been watching him too. Driving in the same neighborhood, frequenting the same store, wearing the same hat, he too was a creature of habit. He too would have had to reroute his commute, rework his day-to-day life to avoid me. He too would have to run into an equation with a finite number of possibilities, many of which he did not account for. As my mother likes to say, a drop of water, if persistent enough, will hollow out a stone. I was not made of stone, but I was hollow enough to take note of the fact that the 9mm was kept in a drawer inside of my dad's nightside table, that the bullets were kept in a dresser across the room, inside a drawer, under my mom's lingerie, along with a single condom, a journal, and another smaller handgun. The morning the man would have abducted me, I had been zigzagging my way through residential streets. I didn't hear the now familiar hum of his car slowing down behind me. I didn't feel the air of his presence, the fear that crept inside me whenever he would get closer. That day, he came out of nowhere. He pulled over to the side of the street, and this time, for the first time, he got out of his car. I stood on the sidewalk and I faced him, not out of defiance or anger that I'd grown to harbor over months of agony, but merely out of fear. fear that paralyzed me, that reminded me that I was still an 11-year-old girl, a child. Across the street, a man had just exited his house. A lunch bag was slung over his shoulder. He stood in his driveway and he watched us. He was a teacher at my school, and though he did not know me, he knew my school uniform, and at that moment he must have sensed something was wrong, because he yelled good morning from his driveway, forcefully, angry even, and when I did not respond, he crossed the street toward us, his long, resolute, and confident strides made me feel safe. Within seconds, my stalker retreated to his car and drove away, and thankfully I never saw him again. I did not tell the teacher that this stranger had been following me for months, that something in me had changed, that I craved an outcome, whatever an outcome would be. I preferred it over the daily dose of danger grinding away at me, sanding me down, making me dull, that I vacillated between wanting to die and wanting to kill him, that I had begun to wonder what was taking him so long. What was he waiting for? Something had to give. Something would have given. On the phone, my dad confesses that he too feared his own gun. He had grown convinced it would take someone's life. For reasons he does not explain, he kept that fear to himself. And I don't ask him why, because whenever he's ready, he'll get around to it. He pauses for a brief moment to tell me that he's arrived at the grocery store, the quick stop to pick up sun-dried tomatoes, as they have a mommy. I had no idea that he had been driving this whole time, and I listened closely as he locks the door to his car and complains that no one returns our shopping carts where they belong. I picture him entering the store, the expression of mild annoyance fading away as he reaches for his beloved sun-dried tomatoes. My tender old man, as soft as he was always meant to be. The day he rid himself of the gun, my father was overcome by a sense of relief, a rush of joy, a wave of peace. He walked easier, he felt lighter, like he could breathe. Me too, I told him over the phone. Me too.
Give it up one more time for Annell. For trusting us with that extremely personal, intimate story about you. All right, next up, Jesse. So I met Jesse back in April for at New Orleans Poetry Fest. He read from his book, The Amateur Scientist Notebook, and I was immediately blown away by his hybrid nature poetry that explains, laments, catalogs, and observes human behavior and relationships through a description of the world around. Working on multiple levels at the same time, Jesse's poems become worlds within worlds, dense terrariums where we, the reader, are both observer and observed. Dense yet poignant, Jesse's metaphysical poetry will leave you wanting more. Since April, Jesse and I have become poetry friends. It's a unique relationship that I feel only writers will truly understand. Most of your conversation centers around literature, the lit scene. You follow and retweet and touch base about various movements or events, and that's not a knock at all. These relationships are valid. We all need a Jesse or 7 Jessies in our lives. Someone who cheers for you, provides advice, and sends reminders to submit to contests. Thank you, Jesse. I am grateful for all the ways Jesse has been in my life these past few months and greatly look forward to a long poetry friendship as well as a regular friendship.
Jesse DeLong teaches composition and literature at Louisiana State University, but he grew up in northern Idaho and western Montana. He holds a BA in English from the University of Montana and an MFA in poetry from the University of Alabama. His poems have appeared in the anthologies Best New Poets 2011 and Feast Poetry and Recipes for a Full Seating at Dinner, as well as the journals Colorado Review, Mid-American Review, Indiana Review, Painted Bride Quarterly, and Typo. With book artist Sonia G. Rousseau, That was really loud. He has published several artist books and chapbooks, including Tearings and Other Poems and Earthwords, both through Curly Head Press. Other than traditional academic settings, DeLong has taught literature at Donaldson's Correctional Facility and has worked as a case manager at a reentry service center, teaching hard and soft skill courses such as anger management and parenting to parolees and probationers. He resides in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Everybody give a warm welcome, Jesse DeLong.
Hey everyone. Thanks for that really personal introduction. I feel like more personal introductions like the one Nikki gave should happen in places like this. So I'm going to read from the Amateur Scientist Notebook. It came out during the pandemic, so it's really good. Other than the New Orleans Poetry Fest, this is the first time I really got to read to a live audience from it, so I really appreciate it. So this first poem, Florida's Water, one of the things the speaker's doing is constantly interrupting himself and starting back over after he interrupts himself. So if you hear those shifts, that's what's happening. Florida's water. Crisp in the lungs, autumn then is a breath held. Stems begin to brittle, birds forage for seeds. Coyote bones, white waste on the river's red bank. Broadcast lost in snow, we drive the interstate where time is suspended between long purple shadows and mornings when the birds eat. Sleeping and the warmth of your breath gathers on glass. When I stir, you smile, staring to where fronds of headlights are guiding us home. The gap between pure white and pure black, the axis, our bodies rotate. When I turn, your eyes are closed. Scribbled in fog is the word we. What is a bone bleached in river light if I am always restless, and restless enough to scavenge? A chickadee sings somewhere in the snow-covered trees, its voice a whistle and whistle's echo, the moth dead on the windowsill for days. For those who tire to scrape throats through frost, snow sloshes the lawn, pebbles, mud, and ice chunks. A sparrow docks on the fence post, ruffles water from wings. Ah, the sun again. I light near the snow globe you gifted me during a softer winter. The glass is chipped and eclipses a ring on the windowsill's dry wood. In stained fingers, sky mirrors on the crest of the globe. Clouds swell, the bird shadows its wings upside down in departure. Dusk in a tree, slowly, slowly. The sky an ice-stilled atom where a brown bat squeals, ultrasonic in the cooling air. I want to pronounce the distance, rattle the treble point where space and time collide, materials of lung and liver etched in this layer where one is one and once lost in one, where one is once here and there. The imprint our bodies make on autumn and after. Past the globe, land emerges in chalk lines, a spine of hills narrowing to knuckles, ridges sharpened where the sky is lit, its paper ends. If only our rituals really nourished us. Near the river dawn, I tender, as if anything more, the coyote rib. Morning slates on pebbles, the current disassembles the sun. Road lights, the only sound in the room. The curtains could be the northern lights. The carpet, a tar pit. This is the void I willingly enter every day. I cross my arms, rest my hands at my shoulders, fingers spread. I take a step back, a step forward, a step back and to the side. Some ants march from a fallen tree to where an apple core browns on weeds. The hunger goes on and on like this, an animal knowing from which flares of love you feed. A footprint in the snow fills it in. In the forest, in the snow, 5 miles past my house, I found a field guide. Not as damaged as you would think, the pages, gray with hail, still held, ink blurred at the edges, as if the shape and meaning remained out of focus, as if winter planned to write not love notes, but of how the bird's brown bruises on sky scarred its margins in shadow. This winter was the last spent wondering whether your eyes are different shades. The bird seemed to understand and kept its distance, weary, the field its guide to how large a shadow can loom. Bird, a clump of rat bones lodged in my throat. I went inside, set the field guide down where it situated sunlight around its dust. There is no end to light and shadow, only ourselves doubled over and over through a field guided by how skin scatters vapors. There is no end to you and I, only the way we spend every day pretending to forget. Then why does it feel like someone has scrawled chalk in my lungs? Before you left, I pretended we still held close to the hallelujah of our sweat. We could still cross the field without giving away whether one or no or two people had been strong enough or restrained enough to tread across the field without leaving any markings. These next three poems that I'm going to read from are a serial poem, and the overarching title is Field Guide to the Southeastern Idaho Phosphate District. So I'll read three of those. An introduction to the cycle. The southeastern corner of Idaho, just east of Soda Springs, a woman reminded me of someone I met once in the wood smoke of the patio on my uncle's property the last summer before he went to prison. Things turn sometimes, and you end up in a place you surely thought someone would be, just not yourself. Or that person is you, though you are no longer who you trained yourself to live with and hardly recognize the expressions in the mirror. The way her gaze, your gaze, I admit, it was always you, attenuated outwards towards the junipers, though I could tell as you fringed the hem of your sundress that you were inside yourself, investigating, running over and over, like a water wheel, like infinity, like time, whatever it was that nourished you, a feeding. We do this to ourselves, this erudition. Years later, calmly whispering into the receiver became the same as shouting at you, heart full of wood smoke, across the field. It was a sort of loss, as if I were only remembering a conversation we'd had and needed to search it out, as you'd searched out whatever it was you had to find before it, bright as decay, a reckoning, found you. Structural setting of bird phosphor. Most field guides illustrate the events influencing a landscape. But how can we relay what needs said without sounding like we've scavenged the husk of a roadside whitetail? Do you believe, as Freud did, that we are self-destructive, acid-lined and rooted deeply beneath what we consciously perceive? To frame it this way, the senses are an illusion. We want to fuck our mothers, not because they are so, but because sex is a sort of death, and how dare they create and get away with it? Or, like Skinner, do we only seek out whatever gives us pleasure, a species of hedonists, no morals other than dopamine? Aren't they the same? The times you begged me, and it was a begging, to pin your wrists to the mattress, to overrule your breath with the sound of gravel. I am not who you think I am, and so I hurt you. You are not who I think you are, and so you hurt me. Like a dog salivating at the sound of a bell, I realized that when you bruised my most tender of organs, you saw me hairy chest and stench of dick, as I saw myself, and I was happy. We called this a history of intimacy, and thought about it as we drove by the phosphate mines. Men emerged from earth, wheezing because the air was too bright. They were not used to being treated this way, and drove home to their families who glowed so white that the men had to shield their eyes, sons with clean fingernails, daughters tragic enough to date boys who wanted to be minors, wives who hated hearing canaries sing because it sounded too much like their own names. Dry Valley Mine. 1. The air, sandpaper, walking through a cornfield in late autumn. 2. Hair uncombed, lips blue with sleep, you smeared the suds from my fingers on your dress and went to bed. Night, all of it, I heard you scuttling to find sheets that didn't feel like a moth in the gut. I got up and turned on the lamp, its light gulping the room. When I couldn't stand the way you looked in it, I walked outside. At the fence, a caribou, fur scraggy, ribs pressing on skin like a man trying to force his hands through. The caribou must have wanted something to hold off its hunger for sleep. Approaching it, I displayed my empty palms. I offer it what I offer you. So this next group of poems, these next 3 are also a serial poem called Experiments in the Field of Light. Song Unending. Moonlight opens on floral sheets where your body should be. Smells of wet wood, sleep sweat, the dust of curtains. I step onto the porch where it is midnight or sometime after. Sky mildews, skin is sticky and cooling. Something I cannot see, maybe you, is making noises, a scrapping sound, a rummage. I point the flashlight into the fog. Its light bursts successively on every molecule until, in a flutter, your silhouette, a woman pretty enough to make the birds shut up, flickers towards me. Every moment is light particle by light particle, reborn. Participants of light and shadow. I listen as you exhale into the whine of the ceiling fan. Around us, the house is dark and slow. I rise, air snaps my skin. A tire fire controls the horizon, colored as tin sheeting left to rust in rain light. I feel another man orbiting me, a flickering white phosphor of a man. A projection of myself, strained and semi-transparent. I watch the man sit up in bed. He leans over where your face is exposed to the ceiling. He draws the covers back over your shoulders. You startle and breathe into the dust lamp. When you turn over, the man rises and walks towards me. I feel a steel ball of light thud in my lungs. We step to the sill and I look out to where the tire fire has begun to smolder. Orion scratches, stuttering out of view. As I return to bed, the man wavers in and out of me. A whirl of dust connects with the wooden blade above us. Light withdrawals. Because my side of the sheet has lost light's warmth, I scoop close, press my stomach to your spine. We share what makes us visible. And this last poem I'm going to read is the last poem in the book, Array. For light to hold, or after. For light, silhouettes of striking to clasp onto us, holes who can't carry it, or after. What dusk does when the curtains close. Let's renew ourselves there, that paper season of behavior, you and me huss to one another, particles of what the day likes to combust, you and me beaming under affairs of damage. DNA, disturbed in a sunsplotch, carry forward, if you would, the bright wreckage of us. The street, papered in yesterday's parade of blossoms, rouses you, sleep deprived but battered by morning, to the pavement wet wrap of humidity, the porch lamp left on. How many of us are useless by noon? Pupils narrowing, you turn to me and speak. No. Let's renew ourselves where our bodies eclipse last night's moonless emissions, a sort of ring of time never met by light, so that at that hour, any hour of dark, we appeared different, not a shadow, but what a shadow swallows. Why else, but at this moment of blindness, would I mold the contour of my sweat to yours? If a bat, wings of stretched, veiny flesh, were to ruck up what tiny particles of appearance somehow endured the day, it could not even perceive with those burrow-born eyes that separate heat sources disrupted its sonar. Isn't that what love is? Us hungering for an indistinguishable presence in a world we will never navigate? Or is it, while still in the bat's ricocheted mapping of a half-light, to suddenly separate who we drew our warmth for, animals confronting our own sensory competence? Whether we even believe the sun is 8 light minutes from Earth. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Jessie. Jessie. All right, last but certainly not least, our out-of-town poet, Georgia Pearle Foster.
Georgia Pearle Foster. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce our guest reader, poet, editor, and scholar. Can I say doctor? Can I do that? Dr. Georgia Pearle Foster tonight. Georgia has been on my Facebook radar for years now, ever since being introduced to through a mutual friend, Elizabeth Walters, who is also an incredibly talented teacher and writer who got waitlisted by UNO the year she was accepted by Columbia, but that's a story for another night. Shout out to Liz. Shout out to Liz. So we had a trip planned. While Georgia was in Houston getting her PhD and working on her debut collection, Refinery. But the universe had other plans. The pandemic happened. Georgia moved to a farm in Idaho, sent one child off to college. Welcomed a new one. Georgia's story is definitely a lot like this. Yeah, it's full of love and family and loss and change. And did I mention love? Definitely, because even her most challenging poems and essays, which deal with some really heavy social justice and family justice issues, avoid rhetoric completely and are instead full of quiet insight, even grace. And so here we are, years later, finally getting graced by a visit with Georgia Pearle Foster, celebrating the debut of Refinery. Yeah. Do you have a bio?
I do. Georgia Pearle Foster's debut collection of poetry, Refinery, was published last month by Foster Literary. Refinery is a collection centered on the present-day South, brimming with rich images and narrative beauty. The reader, along with the speaker, encounter oil spills, train wrecks, and a complicated and complicit history that is trying its best to swallow whole the book's speaker, and with her, the whole world. Eco-poetry at its best, this collection will have any reader, but especially those in the Deep South, unable to set their book down. Born and raised in the Gulf South, Georgia Pearle Foster is an alumna of Smith College and holds an MFA in poetry from Lesley University and a PhD in creative writing and literature from the University of Houston. Her poems have appeared in Ninth Letter, Kenyon Review Online, WSQ, among others. She now lives in a valley in rural Idaho. Her first collection of poems, Refinery, debuted in September of this year, and she is currently at work on a second collection of poems as well as a memoir. Give it up for Georgia Pearle Foster.
Thank you for that incredibly generous introduction, and thank you to the readers who came before me. Some beautiful, vulnerable work, both of you. Thank you. So this book was 15 years in the making, and it's a memoir in poems. I know a lot of poets are really cagey about how truthy or not truthy their work is. I'm not one of those poets. It's all my life. And that's my kid, so sorry guys, but you get it all. Okay, I'm gonna quit talking and start reading. Before the wreck. Tempting to think of my beginning with Mama as her beginning. Nights she walked the tracks, nights she ran the train signals, wearing my father's jeans, unzipped, button extended with a hair tie through the loop. So much of my life I've wanted to make a mother of her, reduce her to the pair of arms made to hold me, and the temporary belly swell that brought me wailing through her. Should she who directed the conductors through the night shift too be held accountable for every cargo line and passenger train, every curve in the rail, the cross ties and spikes, I dare you try to harrow her there. Blink twice and she'll be off, molted out of those steel-toed boots to become a platinum wisp, her mind struck to outpace us all. There are a lot of mama poems in this book. You know, there's a David Allen Cope song. I don't know if you guys know that country song. It's like, it's not really a country song unless you have mama and prison and trains. That book is this. Not that she was too hungry, but hungry. Mama knew the exchange for a well-turned eyelash, a well-pitched sob. Say she's like the sea sparkle algae. Not that they mean to feed on spilt oil, or bloom with the river runoff sloughed from the heartland farms, gathered in tributary then dumped at the silt mouth of the Gulf. But still, give them silt, and algae will eat the water clearer, will open up the dead zones in the Gulf. Say baby girl grows like jellyfish, like a sea nettle bloom. Specifically, say one day she'll have a Medusa cap of tendrils, will flourish in the space that algae makes. Hypoxia can strangle out the fish, but nettles don't need so much oxygen, need mostly the open deep. I skipped over all the daddies, so you'll have to read the book to get that. Mama tries to die. And I don't know how to look on her with anything but fury. Her in her sad, mute hospital gown. So I settle my knuckles on her wax forehead. Imagine I can pull the long-gone ball gowns from behind her eyelids, peel the long-lost sequins from her nipples, release the angels from her ears. On my way to this infirmary, I stole the grape leaf earrings off her jewelry tree. Mother, thanks be to your impossibility, to your long sobs after my bedtime, to the faltering notes you sang me all the way to school, to your raucousness, your lust, even your angel dust. Here, among the machines, you tell me I'm haloed. You tell me I'm your own mother, reborn, or the white witch, the healer in my hands. Now isn't the time to tell you how limited I am. I can barely bear you, can't put your mind back in place. I only take my thumb and trace the stitches in your face. Drugged and dizzy, you fell and fell on your busted vase. And here we are laughing, you saying, just call me Grace. And oh, mother, of course you are Grace. We're caught in so many unearned moments. like when I slake the voice you gave me out my throat and sling it through the hospital halls. Mother, oh whatever, of course we may stay shattered, still singing. Refinery, Jubilee City. My father could not read for pleasure, rather, he read how sheetrock needed to set square against a new home's frame, read the lines of 40-pound test and wrestled with reels, read snapper and mackerel. My father read the trawler's tall masts, picked through the bait fish, jellyfish, cuttlefish. My father knew how to keep what to keep. With his blood money, we bought me books, navy cardigans and pinafores, and some supposed way out. Away from the egrets, gone from undertow and tide and man-o-war shores. No more mollusks in sand. Father, with you gone, my hands grew dyslexic. My air kept too filtered, tempered. Forgive me this refinement. Forgive me how we paid for it. Past the refinery. Yachts knock in the harbor. Oil tanks glow full and fat beneath the yellow globes and smokestacks. Such brights at the refinery, those sweet lubricants, those rich plumes that chuff and chug at the sky. Such light fuel lifted from the residual crude. Along our shorelines, the spilt sheen's been sunk, and the sands are sifted white enough again. Each night I drive home past the vats. I want to believe I can't help my mouth, how I'm drawn to cup it round the inbound pipes. In nightmares I swallow, until pitch edges my gums and silt slops off my teeth. I don't even pause to breathe. One more from this one, and then I'm going to read a couple from the next collection to come. Refinery after the spill. Down in Bayou La Batterie, oysters sludged in oil, an irritant too slick to make pearls. Along the coast, thick yellow boom formed a barrier, and crews set out with skimmers. Still, the oysters choked. I'm sick of writing all the ways to choke or not to choke. Enough sputtering metaphor. Enough bathes and likenesses and poor filtering bivalves. We've asked too much of the oysters. Too many times we've said, here mollusk, you're stuck in muck. What'll you choose to do? Have some grit, baby, grit, and best make it luminous. This next book is full of what I call my baby daddy poems. I have 3 of those baby daddies. I have a lot more poems than baby daddies, but you know, after I finished my PhD, I left and moved to Eastern Idaho and started running a wedding venue. I mean, it's all for the books, right? So there were all these marriage poems that started cropping up, but also single mother poems. So that's what I'm going to read you now. I married you because you cut the beveled princess, but look, she's gone to pawn before us. Because lithium's done your mama good. Because you let infants suckle your bicep. Because your chest was a moss bed in dew light. your ears like new mushrooms. But look, you kept my water deposit. I married you because you sucked straight from the tap. Because you understand that the EPA's standards for potable water are more stringent than the FDA's. Because you always flossed and used your tongue scraper before passing out on the lawn. I married you because your international bitterness unit was at least 85%. Because you looked so strict in your hick hat. Because your armpits taste like cedar, the crooks of your knees like oak. Because you could really wield an oar. Because you swept my floor so bare, but look, you tore the linoleum. I married you because you tore my stockings so well. Because you kept a parade after dusk, but look, the streets are jammed. I married you because you popped my muffler. Because you never bought me earmuffs. Because the streets after dusk are a bore when you're always on me to lock our shut doors. You cared so much. Transit 41. My children fall asleep on their backpacks, their faces shut and facing the steel seat backs. On the 41 bus, it is morning, it is evening, it is morning. The city isn't awake yet. The city is on its way home. I was a young mother once, barely out of my teens. I had a khaki-colored house, a copper stove, a bright oven. Now the bus brakes in loud hydraulics. The city keeps dark beyond the windows, reflected only my own parenthetical mouth and my children, feet steady, exhaling. This lesson I know my boy already knows. I didn't trip coming up here, and I feel like I won, as in like everything after that is perfection. Somewhere west, a combine is crushing new mice, and my freshman son needs help with Steinbeck. And tomorrow we'll catch the 84 bus to the Red Line, to the 40 bus before sunrise, and my daughter will nod in the crook of my armpit, her young breath still full of spearmint. She won't notice the shadows that shuffle beneath each overpass we pass. I don't think about that Christmas when I sign the charity papers homeless, when we wait at the next bus stop where there are 3 ageless, white and gaunt, picking through butts on the sidewalk. They murmur together, my corner, that bitch got my corner, and I mouth to my boy, meth, which he knows only as the smoke that took his father to some unknowable world. But he knows the look I strike means huddle closer, trust nothing near us, save our own spared feet and step quickly. Do not ask me where we're going, boy, step quickly toward dawn. But tonight he is writing on Lenny and George, and tonight I bide my tongue. I say nothing of men not knowing their strength. 2 more. Gone, ungone. What things we thought we'd be able to be, back when I took his swarming half cells into me and swelled. Together we thought. Then I outgrew his waistline. Then I blew out my own skin. And the human I held up for him, full of wordless wails and need and need. He couldn't stay to count hairs on the small scalp that matched his scalp. Couldn't daily confront his own eyes gone young in the new face we'd made. But still, slice a section of my brain, you'll find the cells of our sun. You'll find the Father's DNA. You'll find we never get to leave what we leave. Last one. Notes on a small handful of patriarchs. Some women want the man because he comes bearing security, good God, the platinum and the glimmer and the I'll take care there. Some women are over this whole binary bullshit. Some of us just wanted help with the dishes. Some of us just wanted, I don't know, understanding or mutual appreciation for orgasms of varying length, or the freedom not to want an orgasm at all. Y'all, what were we asking for when this whole thing got going? Oh, to be considered, also heard, to be touched only when we want to be touched. Was that so hard? But what did I want of the patriarchs? Once upon a time, I had a father. Someone took him, left a note. Have this pile of platinum, this mess of glimmer, and take care there. Once upon a time, I had a mother. She caught in the cogs bit by bit and broke. I wanted a world that could quit crushing us, but right, I was asking too much. If I ever wanted a man, what I wanted most was a stern chest packed with private softness. Isn't that what we wanted from each other? Just some human space where we could exhale, shrug our clothes off, be safe for God's sakes. Thank you so much.
All right, one more time for Georgia. So in case you missed it, oh yeah, one more time for all of our readers. So in case you missed it, Jesse and Georgia both have books that you should buy. Jesse, how do people buy your book?
Venmo or Cash App, I guess.
Do you have copies with you?
Yeah.
Hell yeah! See Jesse after in like 3 minutes to buy copies of this amazing poetry collection. It has me reeling all the time. And then, Georgia, how do people buy copies of your book?
So you can come see me, and I have a QR code that will take you to the website, and we have it on sale for half off. If you buy it through the website tonight, I'll send you a signed copy in the mail because I took way too long to get to United Home. But they're there now.
That's a deal. That sounds amazing. Yeah. All right, so please see Jesse and Georgia afterwards. And then very soon, Annell will have a book. I promise you. She's so talented. So when that happens, we'll definitely announce it at a future liminal event.
Right.
All right. Speaking of future
liminal
events.
Yeah, we have so many cool things coming up, you guys, in November. Tuesday, November 1st, from 7 to 9, we are having our next in-person generative. 7 to 9 is online? On Zoom? It's on Zoom, you guys. 7 to 9 Central. Okay. And then Thursday on the 3rd is, Poetry and Pie. Yes. This is our new thing. Okay, so we're having Poetry and Pie at Windowsill Pies. And our first readers are going to be Brad Richard and Christy Lario. And those of you who are from here know how special that is. Yes. So we definitely are all going to be there, and it's going to be fantastic, because what is better than poetry and pies separately, nevertheless together? Yeah. And then Monday, November 14th at Bar Redux, that is going to be our in-person workshop. And actually it's going to be a revision workshop, sort of power hour, getting ready for all the submissions that open up in the winter. And then finally, at the end of the month, we have our next reading on November 20th. We have Megan Sullivan, Kelly Harris, and Derek Harriel.
All the way from the University of Mississippi. His book came out a few months ago, Come Kingdom. It's winning awards, whatever. Derek will be here. Please come back in November. And speaking of readings, we will have another one in December. Liz Brina is going to be there. She's going to be reading. Christian Taylor, who a lot of you know, he's a local poet who's recently gotten a lot of attention. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. And then our third reader for December is, who am I forgetting? Oh, Neil, M.O. Walsh. If you are also local, you know Neil. We love Neil. And he's donating his payment from that event to the UNO Alumni CWW Association. So come out.
He's so funny. I'm just saying, it's gonna be really wild.
So follow us on Instagram if you don't already, and you will see announcements for all of these different things.
Come to all the things, but more importantly, hang out because they're not throwing us out until 8.
And we're not being thrown out until 8, so please buy another drink, treat always well, and then we'll have an after party probably at Cajun's. And while you're having a drink, while you're hanging out, please see Jesse and Georgia and buy their books. All right, we love you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
It seems like it. I know, that's a long time, but it goes back.